just a few more weeks and summer is over. And hopefully we get to go inside the church and celebrate the Holy Eucharist. Good morning and welcome all of you joining us to this celebration of Holy Eucharist, especially our parishioner who continue to watch us on live streaming this morning. Think for a moment the two following scenarios. Your loved ones came to you and said, I got a great promotion, a great job offer, but we need to move to New York. What would you do? Or your loved ones come and tell you, I really want to build a house. We need to tear up part of this house. But during that it may take 3 years to build this house. What would your reaction be? Because it may demand you uprooting your very house and move to somewhere else as well. The scripture this morning asking us, can I make that sacrifice? And why is it that I would want to make that sacrifice? Of moving a job that I love to have just because my spouse wants to go to New York to advance their own career. Or maybe then you stuck at home raising your kids, sacrificing what you good and love doing. So what will you do when you face major decisions like that in your own relationship? The scripture this morning kind of gave me an insight into 4 words. Do I want to wear a crown or a cross? Do I want to see my call to discipleship as an authentic way to following Jesus Christ? Or do I see it as a cost of discipleship? Regardless whether it is going to be the crown I wear, full of victory, full of joy, full of accomplishment, or is it a cross that I have to submit to and carry? And yet it's a question that Jesus being presented to all of us this morning when he said, whoever wishes to come after me must deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. So where do you see the cross as the essence of your faith? As the call to discipleship? Or is it really a cost to discipleship? A demands that you have to give up everything, including losing your life. So what is your definitions of sacrifices? To let go of your self-control, to let go of your selfishness, your self-want and self-desired, so that you can follow Jesus Christ? What is it? Mother Teresa had this beautiful quotations, authentic way of sacrifices, and sometimes it can be very difficult. A sacrifice to be real must hurt and must empty ourselves. Give yourself fully to God. He will use you to accomplish great things on the condition that you believe much more in His love than in your weakness. That you must believe more in God's love for you than in your weakness. Can only a saint do that? Or can all of us accomplish that? As what's He asking of us to do? If a sacrifice to be real must hurt and must empty ourselves. Jeremiah this morning making that sacrifices, that call to discipleship. And yet in his moments of quietness, he said, "You dupe me, O Lord, and I myself be duped. And all day long I am an object of laughter. Everyone mocks me." Jeremiah truly reflects what Mother Teresa said. Jeremiah relied on God's love and not on his own weaknesses, on his own chastisement, or anger and hatred from the people. And yet he struggled that whole dichotomy, the call to discipleship or the cost of discipleship. And that can happen to all of us in our journey of life. Those of you who are in relationship, you're based on love, you're based on trust. But sometimes people also based on sacrifices as well. But in relationship, then you have to ask yourself, am I compromising or am I sacrificing? Because compromising can be very different from sacrificing. I'm compromising for a win-win situation, or sometimes it can be a win-lose situation. But when you're sacrificing something, you're giving up part of yourself. You're emptying part of yourself for the one that loves you and the one that you love. And you ask yourself sometime, is it really worth it? And why am I doing this? Day after day, years after years, until your very last breath. And so Jesus said here in Matthew chapter 16, his prediction to the disciples. "I must go to Jerusalem and suffer greatly from the elders, the chief priests, and the scribes, and be killed, and on the third day be raised." We're moving now to a path where Jesus is about to enter into Jerusalem. He's trying to transform the disciples in their way of thinking and strengthening their faith for this journey. And that process of transformation also required them to understand that Jesus must sacrifice. And maybe part of your life too, in your own journey of transformation, it may demand you to make some form of sacrifices. And then sometimes you ask, I can't sacrifice this. We need to talk and compromise this. Because what you're asking me to do may be too much to bear and too much to carry. So psychologists made this research and asking couples who are living together and who are married these questions. And maybe a question that you can reflect for yourself. Have you sacrificed for your partner today? Did your partner sacrifice for you today? So they explore and interview couples in San Francisco as well as in New Zealand for 2 weeks. Have you sacrificed for your partner today, or did your partner sacrifice for you today? So this is their finding in 2 weeks. Participants reported that they sacrificed about 3 times during the 2-week period, and that their partners sacrificed slightly less often. However, responses to both questions varied widely from none at all to almost every day. But the heart of the study is to ask couples, do you notice that your partner or your spouse or your loved one is making the sacrifices? Because there's nothing more painful than you making all the sacrifices and your loved one don't really care whether you do it or not, or just walk by and ignore, nothing ever happens. So the study in this finding discovered that only half of the time when your loved one making the sacrifices that you notice, and the other half you went unnoticed at all. How discouraging that would be if I am the one who never notice that you are making the sacrifices. All the ushers, all the volunteers who scan all of you coming in, they're making sure that you're okay. And after Mass, many volunteers who clean the spaces so that we could be free and feel safe. So when we acknowledge each other's sacrifices, we create two cycles, what we call a virtuous cycles, allowing us to feel gratitude, allowing us to express thankfulness to each other. And when we go and ignore each other's sacrifices, we create a vicious cycles. Because we feel being used and being taken advantage of each other's. So St. Paul asking us to make a decision today. Wearing the cross or wearing the crown on your head. And this is what he invited us to do. By the mercy of God, to offer your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God, your spiritual worship. And that's a journey that Jesus is also asking of us to do, offering your body as a living sacrifice, not a dead sacrifice. If your sacrifices lead you to death and anger and bitterness, then you are making the wrong decisions. But your sacrifices should allow you to feel alive. Even if you have to die, die a little, but don't die to the point where you become so angry and bitter with the world. So living sacrifices, holy and pleasing to God, is so important. So then psychologists help us to kind of gauge your motivations to your sacrifices. There's two methods. The first is sacrifices made for approach-motivated reasons. Approach-motivated reason. That is, making your partner happy and beneficial to your life and to the life of your children and your loved ones. And the other opposite is avoidance-motivated reasons. You're making the sacrifice because you avoid conflict. You avoid creating another third world war. When you do that, you can become very unhappy and unhealthy in the long run. So what are your motivations to making your sacrifices? The call to discipleship or the cost of discipleship. And you can see in bitter priests, where we don't find happiness in this calling. We can just see, my call is a major cost to my happiness, to who I am. And you may tell that priest and that religious, I think you have chosen the wrong vocations. And the same thing is true with married couples. Maybe you have found a wrong couples in your relationship. And we cannot disguise sacrifices as a way to take away your authentic self and who you are. So what will it be? And when will you have to sit down and say, will this be a sacrifice or will it be a compromise? Or will you be willing to, as Jesus said, his crown become not a crown of joy, crown of victory, but a crown of thorns. And yet he's willing to do it. He's willing to empty himself, just as Mother Teresa, allowing us and encouraging us to empty ourselves and to realize at the end of the day, to the final day of your breath and my breath on this earth, that you and I rely on God's love, God's goodness, and not on our human weaknesses.